My name is Sari van Poelje, and I'm an expert in business innovation. I help businesses innovate more quickly than they innovate their products. And one of the things I do for that is to coach leaders. I've been doing this for 33 years, and every year I think, what is it that I do? Can I do it better? What can I add into this to accelerate the process? And I figured out that actually I only do and focus on three things. I focus on silences, stories, and sequences. I want to focus on sequences now. So what is it that we mean by a sequence? By sequence, what I mean is a pattern of behavior, of thinking, of feeling that leads to a known outcome. So it's kind of like going da 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 da, and someone else will go da da. That's a sequence, and it's so inbred that you do it automatically. And that's exactly what I mean. In leadership team coaching, I think sometimes our responsibility is to interrupt patterns. Because as soon as a behavior is automatic, you know people aren't learning anything. So how do you actually look at sequences? How do you distinguish them or identify them? What I use for that is transactional analysis. TA is a psychological theory that was developed by a guy called Eric Berne in the 50s, but is so useful today. I have been using it for more than 30 years. So the great thing about TA is that nearly every concept describes a pattern. And because our job is to be pattern interrupters, what better theory can you have than one that distinguishes patterns? So one of the kinds of patterns that we talk about in TA is patterns of ego states. Ego states are kind of the building blocks of your personality. And an ego state, the definition of it is it contains patterns of thinking and feeling linked to patterns of behavior. We distinguish three types of ego states: parent, adult, child. The parent ego state is the ego state that you've learned or taken over from your parents. For instance, if I hold out my hand and I say, "How do you do?" people will automatically, usually also hold out their hand. That's a parental introduct or a parental behavioral pattern. We also talk about child patterns. Child patterns of thinking, feeling linked to behavior are really the stuff that helped you survive your childhood. So, for instance, sometimes I notice I get into a group and I feel a little anxious, and I'm going, "Oh, usually I'm not so anxious about this." And I realized that this anxiety for bigger groups, when we grew up in all these other countries in unknown places as an expat, that actually helped keep me safe. It's just not so handy to have nowadays. We call that a child pattern of behavior, perhaps, in my case. We also talk about adult patterns, where we have thinking, feeling linked to behavior, which is fitting for the here and now with the competencies you have today. This might be patterns of problem solving, or patterns of thinking, or patterns of behavior that actually help you find options in today's world. When I do leadership team coaching, I look to see which ego state are they actually talking from. Are they talking from parent, from adult, or from child? Because if they're talking from adult, they're well connected to the here and now. If I hear people talk from parent or child, I know they're probably in the past. They have what we call a rubber band to the past, and that means that there's something stuck for them. So one of the things I look at is patterns of ego states. Ego states help me see, is someone in the here and now, or are they repeating a pattern from the past? And as a pattern interrupter, that pays to pay attention to that.